we can introduce this topic for further. But it's a question that comes up all the time, and we need to document it.
Okay, everyone, I am going to start the broadcast. Just a reminder to put your phones on silent. Starting.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Water Commission mission meeting on Thursday, June 18th, 2020. Thank you for being with us. We're going to have this again, a remote session. And so I would like to first call to order. So Secretary, can you please do the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Young?
I'm here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Vice Chair Kilborn?
Here.
And Chair Keller?
Here.
Thank you.
Liaison Sneddon is also here.
Great,
thank you. Welcome. So are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Hegmark?
Chair Keller, there are no changes to the agenda today.
Okay. So I would like to open up to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. So are there any hands raised? Anyone that wants to speak at this point?
Chair Keller, no hands raised at this time, so no public comment.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we are on item 5, the consent items. We only have one consent item, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. Any need for discussion? Any comments? Okay. So I guess we'll have to do the roll call just to confirm that we're all in agreement with those.
I'll actually make a motion. I think we need a motion to approve. Motion to approve. I make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So yes, please do the roll call.
Davis first, Kilborn second. Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn?
Yes.
And Chair Keller?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the administrative items, we're going to start with the Water Resources COVID-19 response update. So Mr. Gagmark, if you can let us know how we're doing.
Chair Keller, commissioners, community members, we added this item to the agenda a couple of months ago, and I just want to keep bringing this back. My intent here is just to kind of review where we are, and more than anything, just open it up to questions the commission or public may have about how Water Resources is responding to the current pandemic. Next slide. So it's just kind of a recap of that. I want to remind our community that our drinking water remains safe and reliable. We've done a lot to make sure that our treatment processes can and will remove all viruses. The city's wastewater continues to be treated and safely released back into the environment. And we do have what's called a continuity of operations plan, which basically lays out for us how we would respond depending on how severe the pandemic became. It focuses on how we ensure our protection of our staff, but then also ensures those critical things like chemicals and materials that we need to continue to process our wastewater. Again, city staff are here and available and responding to emergencies as needed. It means water main breaks, sewer main repairs, and of course calls for service from our community. I do want an update from last time is our capital improvement projects. We did put, in particular, the water main replacement project on hold because it did require at times for us to shut water off to various customers. We are going to reestablish that project and get it going because it does heads off unexpected main breaks. And so we will be restarting that on June 29th. We're mostly focused right now on the business areas of our community, but we will also have residential customers that are impacted. Typically, we don't have the water off for more than 8 hours, and we try to work with our customers to let them know what they can do to prepare, how they can flush their toilets when the water is off, all these things that there are workarounds for. So we are going to be restarting that effort. As for that, all the rest of our capital projects are continue to move forward. A lot of them are all behind the scenes. Next slide. On this slide, I'm going to have bring along Amanda Flessy, our wastewater system manager, and Galen Fair, our laboratory supervisor, to talk a little bit about this. There's been a lot of buzz in the community about testing of our wastewater for the presence of COVID and what that may tell us about the extent of it in our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Flessy.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. So for the past few months, we have been working with BioBot to test our wastewater to see if we have detection of our COVID-19 and how much it's shedding in our sewer system. So yeah, this chart is the results we've been getting from BioBot, and we've been having some issues with BioBot in their data reporting, and so we haven't been really sharing this because they've been using kind of wrong population numbers. They've been using the county rather than the city, so it kind of throws it off a little bit. And then also what's wrong with these, or what's challenging, I should say, with the testing is we send out our samples on a Monday. We take our samples on a Monday, and usually there's a 2-week delay. So this information is behind for 2 weeks. So how it's helpful to us is, or the community and the health department, it's really behind the times. And so the health department has really no interest in these numbers as of just yet. So the sampling is also does not provide very specific results. It just shows a trending, and so they're kind of it just shows how we're trending up and down. Now, what I would like to point out is that BioBot, they changed their testing and analysis. So on May 25th, I decided to put in both of these analyses that we received from BioBot. They used to, they revised their detection limits from 6,000 times to 1,500 times. So they're really now starting to pick up some of the what would have previously been non-detects. Now they're starting to pick it up. So that's why there's such a big jump between the two symptoms, the two systems. And so then also all of our June numbers look a little bit more dramatic than what was previously. However, what this does show you is that, yes, in May when we were on a shutdown, it was very, very effective. And now as we, as phases are lifted, you can tell that we are growing in our estimated cases. Now, these are just estimated cases, and it is through a calculation. However, we don't know that calculation. That is proprietary to BioBot. So we we're not sure, or nor can we confirm. And it is just, again, just an estimate. So our BioBot kind of did this pro bono, and each of the sampling was $150 for each sample. And it was for 2 months. Our last sample was just sent off this past Monday, and that would be our last sample for $150. They are upping their price to $1,500 per test. And when we research this, other labs are similar. So other labs have this sampling cost between $1,500 to $2,500. So that would mean the cost would substantially be impacted to us to a $5,000 to $10,000 a month if we wanted to continue to sample. We've reached out to the county health department to see if they would be interested in this information and if they could help with the cost. And they're simply just not interested at this point, and they have no money to provide us or help us with this cost. We are still researching. Ms. Fair has contacted other labs and are looking to see if these tests are comparable or similar to this BioBot, because if we do go with another lab, we want to make sure that it's apples to apples and not apples and oranges. So we are still researching that. But if no one is looking at this information, is it really something we want to continue with and spending the money on testing? So that's all I've got.
So with that, if the commission has any questions, we'd be happy to field those. But at this point, we've taken our last test. We're going to continue. Ms. Fair has been working with folks at UCSB about potentially doing some additional testing. But I think for the most part, we are going to discontinue this due to a lack of interest and, of course, skyrocketing costs that if no one's interested in the data, it just doesn't seem right now a value to continue to track.
Yeah, it seems like the 2-week delay is probably the biggest issue. I mean, if you want to get, if you want to have some mean of making a decision, 2 weeks is probably too late when we see the caseload going up. I'm just a little surprised on the 6-8 results with 17,000 cases, which, is like, how do they calibrate that? And, it just makes you think about that proprietary equation. I'd like to sort of know how they do that, but yeah. And so the 615 is the last sample that was sent out, and that's, in principle, that's it?
Actually, it was Monday, 6/22. So we have 2 more coming. Yes. And in fact, 6/8 was sent to us late last night. So I was able to get it into the presentation this morning. We were all floored by the estimated cases and really alarmed. They're saying 18% of our population is in fact impacted with this COVID. So, but yes, the 2 weeks is really what is kind of throwing us off. It is such a delay. Really, we can't make any decisions at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just right now, I mean, Ms. Fair and Ms. Leslie have tried to reach out to get more information on that number because obviously it's very alarming, and they're been unwilling to share their formulas and how they come up with that. So we really just don't have a lot of faith right now in the number itself. So just another strike against this.
Right. Are the results that you're going to be getting from the UCSB lab, which I think I know, is comparable in terms of at least the virus per liter of sewage?
I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Fair. She's actually been working closely with Ms. Patricia Holden from UCSB, and I think their testing is a little different in what it is that they are their results will be showing.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Hagmark and Ms. Plessy. So what we've been doing with Patricia Holden is due to the shutdown of everything, she has been unable to analyze any of the samples yet. But she has also been in contact with BioBot to share some of the methodology that they're using, and she wants to have something similar. So without the technical details of isolating the RNA copies to in the stool. I believe it's a similar test method that she will end up analyzing. She's also doing some other viruses and at the same time, since she has the sample. So my understanding is she will have some results to us within the next couple weeks. It's just been her in the lab trying to isolate this virus with the significant number of samples that we've sent her. So it's exciting. I'm looking forward to that data. And it'll be very interesting to see how the numbers correspond with BioBot's numbers. The one thing to note with any viruses or bacteriology, the numbers can swing all over the place. So I take these numbers with a grain of salt, especially with the last one that there are estimating 18% of our population is infected. I think it's just the nature of the testing. And then one thing I do want to note about BioBot, they were very much overwhelmed with the response from the wastewater community. I think as soon as they had offered this testing across the nation, wastewater facilities jumped on board because it is extremely interesting data. So they were basically, and they have been since March, they've basically been doing a research project and been using all guinea pigs, so to speak, to get their methodology to a point where they can actually provide valid data. So as we saw on the May 25th date, it's, they revised it. They actually revised, I think, every single one of our reports since the beginning. So it's been a challenge, but I think it's good data to have just to see what the trends are. So it'll be interesting to see what our 615 data comes back as.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think if we could find some funding to keep it going for at least a month, I think would be very interesting. I mean, just to see how it tracks, and is this a way for us to go to, in the future, be able to sort of monitor the situation that's happening? But that's, of course, that's.
I may have found a lab, so I'm hopeful.
Okay, good. Great, thank you. Other questions?
It looks like there's a comment from the public. I don't know if you want to take it now or wait till the end. I think I have like 4 more slides. They're pretty straightforward. So whatever you'd like to do.
I'd just like to comment. I just want to thank staff for stepping out in front of this and basically doing the testing, because I think it is an emerging technology and an emerging flag on an issue which is going to be around for years for us. And I'm not so sure that, in fact, this type of trending testing, especially when we get to the fact of, are we coming out of the COVID situation? I think in the future, right, be keeping our fingers on the costs and the reliability and the usability. But anyway, I just want to thank you for making the effort that we had to see what's out there. So, again, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So why don't we take that comment at this point?
Alrighty, Ms. Hillary Hauser, I am going to unmute you. You have 2 minutes to speak. Ms. Hillary Hauser, you're self-muted. If you don't mind unmuting yourself.
Wait. Here we are. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Trish Holden and I attended the BioBot seminar some time ago when this was starting. I have 2 questions. Number 1, I agree with Arturo that just not chopping this off prematurely or soon is not a great idea. This technology from BioBot is hugely important in terms of public health, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, about COVID in the community, because as we all know, wastewater tells us it's here before the community knows. But so I'd like to hear, number 1, what Trish Holden's opinion of this is just waiting to get through this startup time to use it, because I think it's a really important tool. But number two, the testing of wastewater, we were talking about city versus county, apples, oranges. The wastewater that's being tested is from El Estero, correct? Where is the county flow? I guess that's my question. Where's the county flow come from?
Chair Keller, Ms. Hauser, this Amanda Flessy, that is one of the problems. There is no county flow. This is tested from El Estero's, but they are using the county population in their calculation. So I don't know where in their calculation they're using this, because I'm not aware of their calculation, their formula. However, when they report back to us, the sample is just the city flow, and we've asked them to revise the reports to show that it's the city's population and not the county's population.
Just a slight clarification on that, we do take a small amount of flow from Mission Canyon that is county, technically county, so that we need to include that population when we are looking at this. And I think you guys are, but yeah, there's a small flow from the county that we treat for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if one takes about 100,000, just bulk big picture, the 18%, just, you see that right there. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for that comment. Yeah, so I would.
The other question.
Yes, please.
Sorry, am I still? What about the other question of Trish Holden? What is she saying about? I mean, is there a way to put this on hold till she gets up to speed? I mean, as I understand that this technique is really exact
Right.
when it gets going. I'd hate to see it chop before it starts.
Thank you very much for that comment. I think the point is, I think we should try to keep this going with whatever funds we can until Dr. Holden is able to bring her lab up to speed, and we can say, okay, we have fairly comparable results, which may be 2 or 3 weeks. UCSB has just reopened some of these laboratories, so she will be having her students helping her out. They're already allowed to go back into the building. So I think this will sort of speed up, but I think we need to give her 2 or 3 weeks to sort of bring it up to speed and make it reliable.
Right on.
Thank you. Other comments? I think, again, Commissioner Davis was right on in thanking you for taking a proactive lead on this. So I think you had one more slide, Mr. Hagenmark.
Yes, next slide. Just kind of a summary of where we are. So just wanted to recap on where we are with our public facing programs. We are continuing with the sewer lateral inspection program, and we're going to get into detail today in our SLIP 2.0 discussion, so I won't spend too much time on that. Suspended water. So we have suspended water shutoffs for non-payment during the pandemic emergency, and we can revisit that once we are out of the emergency. We are still doing virtual water checkups, so if customers are concerned about their water usage, we are here to help. And that takes us to our next one, which is our public outreach campaign. And just kind of hitting on those basic fundamentals, making sure our community knows that our water is safe. We're here if they're facing financial challenges, and keep in mind we don't want to put any of those wipes down the sewer system. It's not designed for those, and can cause a lot of damage, not only to private plumbing backups, but also to the public sewer system. Next slide. And just a plug that we have right now, we have a public outreach to all of our businesses that are restarting. We want to remind them, particularly if they haven't been using water at all for the last couple months, that it's a good idea to flush their water system. That water that's been sitting in there, likely the chlorination has been, there's no chlorine residual in the water, and so just want to make sure that people flush their lines before they start back up again. And we've been sending out messaging on this for the last couple weeks now on this. And then with that, last slide, we're here to make sure that these critical water and wastewater systems continue to provide service to our community, and we're here to help. So here's some numbers if anybody needs to communicate with us. And with that, we are happy to answer any additional questions or make any additional comments.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners or council member or anybody else? Do we have any public comments or questions?
Chair Keller, no public comment.
Okay, well, again, thank you very much. It's a very important item. So this concludes this item, and we will move moving on to the second item, which is the SLIP 2.0 update. And Ms. Fleece will be providing that presentation.
Thank you, Chair Keller. Good morning. My name is Amanda Flessy. I'm the wastewater manager, and I'm here and excited to bring you Sewer Lateral Inspection Program 2.0 update. Next slide, please. Our agenda today, I'll just cover background really quickly and some cost control measures that we've implemented last year. And then really the new direction in response to COVID-19 and how we're going to modify the SLIP program to move from a technical program into more of an educational program for the community. And then finally, the staffing that we'll be needing to make sure we address all of these new programs and direction that we're going. Next slide, please. First, we'll hit on the real briefly the background. So the city's lateral inspection program began in 2016 with kind of a incentive of reimbursement. In 2010, the city eliminated this incentive program and realizing that it just wasn't effective for the community. The plumbers were kind of taking advantage of this program and just increased the cost to the community because of this incentive program. So we decided to move away from it and move to waiving some of our inspection and public work fees. In 2012, the city initiated a program to inspect the entire city's collection system within 10 years, and that was out of our consent decree. We were on target for that, but that may be a little delayed because of this COVID response. So it may be more on the 12-year program. In 2018, our SLIP program really went into full force, and over 850 properties were informed that they needed to inspect their program. Thus is why we started really ramping up the SLIP to help out the community and just to provide them some kind of guidance with their sewer lateral repairs. Next slide, please. So real briefly, this has a lot of verbiage on it. Just to boil this down, this is what triggers a SLIP notification. And to boil it down, there's two items. You either remodel or improve a private property, so we call this a customer initiated, or a city initiated. So you've had a spill, and that will also trigger a SLIP notification. Next slide, please. So I provided this slide to show how convoluted this program could be and why the SLIP, why we're here to help and help the customer move through this program. It is very complicated, and you can go into all different directions. And we're here to help guide the customer through this program. Next slide, please. To boil it down and make it a little bit simpler, I just tried to do a little cheat sheet. So this is currently in our administrative guidelines. Now, last year we have made changes to extend some of these due dates, and we will need to go to the ordinance committee to change some of our guidelines to update a lot of these items. For example, We changed the slip 1 letter, which is your video inspection. That's our initial letter saying we kind of found something, or you had a spill, and so now we need you to video your line. For example, in the administrative guidelines, it's 45 days. We have extended that to 60 days. We just haven't updated the administrative guidelines just yet. So next slide, please. This slide is part of your monthly manager's report. This is a great indicator of how both our sewer systems and collections team is doing, but also how our slip team is doing and helping out the customers. In the past years, I put this in the past 10 years to really show the impact to not only how well we've been doing with our collection system, but really you can tell in the past few years, our slip program has made a big impact in those sewer spills. So we are slowly reducing those. Next slide, please. Okay, so next is we're going to go over some cost control measures and just remind everyone what we kind of implemented last year. So repair option number 1 is just your basic private plumber, encouraging the customers to get their Y replaced or rehabilitated, or their sewer line replaced or rehabilitated. Realizing that this is a high cost for the customer, we researched and implemented last year's options 2 and 3. Option 2 was just the city managed Y replacement for with the city contractor. That was implemented in November of last year. And so far we've had 11 customers participate. 6 repairs have been completed and 5 are in the plan status and with signed contracts and will be repaired probably in June and July. Option 3 is new. That is our rehabilitated, and that also corresponds with our capital improvement program. Next slide, please. One of our biggest challenges in SLIP is trying to explain clearly to the customer the difference between options 1, 2, and 3. So we are continually trying to come up with different types of graphics, verbiage, all sorts of things to help clear up what is the difference and why there is such a cost difference. For option 2, the Y replacement, because it's a dig and replace, you're digging up that whole excavation area, and then you're putting that all back in and putting on the asphalt layer and the traffic control and everything that has to do with it. Right now we have that out for about $5,000. Option 3 is a rehabilitated option, and that is for $1,500 right now. And of course, everyone's like, well, I want option 3 because that's the cheaper, but that only is allowed if you are on the CIP list. That's really if you're eligible. If we're doing, and let me clarify, CIP is our capital improvement project. So if we're already putting in that liner, that white liner in there in the main line, we can go ahead at the same time and rehabilitate your lateral, or not your lateral, your connection, if you qualify for this program. So we have actually, next slide, please. I'm jumping the gun. This is another graph that you will start seeing in your manager's report. So this is showing the year long of option 1s, which is how many people have been taking advantage of option 1. That's your plumber doing the job, and we're just doing the connection. Again, in November, option 2 was implemented, and we started actually doing the repairs in March. So we had 2 repairs completed in March, 2 repairs completed in April, and 2 repairs completed in May. And I think in June so far, we've had two to more repairs completed. So that you'll start seeing. Option 3, notifications of eligibility went out in May because our CIP project has begun in May. So we won't start seeing completion numbers until the fall, probably in the October, because that's just where it falls in the construction schedule. So you'll start seeing this graph more and more each month, and it being populated, and how successful each option is to the community. Next slide, please. All right, our new direction, the meat and potatoes. Next slide. We want to, being in response to COVID-19, realizing the financial and economic hit the community may be facing, the city wants to recognize the impact, and we would like to be more of a help to the community rather than a stress. Recognizing that sewer spills, whether they're private or sanitary sewer overflows, are a public risk. We still feel this is an extremely important program, and how can we pivot into being a help instead of a hinder? One way is to transition from a technical program to an educational program. What we've already started to do is we revised our slip 1 letters, and that's our initial letters for video inspection. Instead of the 60 days, we are now providing 6 months to submit a video. We've also eliminated any kinds of fines or administrative fines or fees for being late on video submittals or repair submittals. So all of our letters have now been updated to remove any kind of due date. And our slip 6, that cost recovery fee letter, that is if you have a spill and we go out to help clean up the spill, we send a letter of our fees going out there, of our costs. That's just built in now to the slip 1 letter as credit towards them getting that video inspection incentive to get that video inspection. So these are some ways that we've already started revising our letters to help out the community. Next slide, please. Realizing how, and asking the question how we can be most impactful and most useful to the public. So what we need to be most helpful to the public is data. Data is the most powerful and useful for our SLIP team to help out the community. So how do we get that data? We need the video. That is probably the most important part of this program. We really need the video. So our proposal is to do a video assistance program. What that means is taking the funding that we've already has set aside in waiving the permit fees and the inspection fees, which run about $200,000 a year, taking that money and moving it to this video assistance program. The slip 1 letter should be revised to let their homeowners know that they can have 2 alternatives. Alternative 1 is provide a credit, a $300 credit toward inspection of the lateral. Now, we are proposing that we do this city contractor similar to option 2, seeing how that has been successful so far, and realizing that a reimbursement program, just the learning from our past and learning that the reimbursement programs probably aren't the most effective way to help the public. And hopefully option 2 in this alternative is the most effective way to help the program. If this is just not doable for the public and they don't elect out of this alternative 1, they have 6 months to still provide a video. Next slide, please. So for that alternative 1, what does this mean? So they have 30 days from when they receive the slip letter to sign up. And this would be a credit towards the work, and the city will manage this program. So any video inspection over the $300, the difference will be the responsibility of the property owner. Another educational portion of this is to partner with Forward Lateral. Forward Lateral is a software company, and it will really complement our program in the educational part. I am more than happy to bring Forward Lateral to show you how their software will. It's pretty ingenious and it's really great. It really helps communicate both with the customer so they know exactly where their video is in the process. They also, in the program, it also shows what the plumber or the contractor sees as a defect, and whether our staff agree or sees another defect in the sewer lateral. And all of that is kind of spelled out and graphed out for the property owner. And they can take all of that information and work with us to come up with some kind of repair plan. So the property owner has the power to make the decision. You know, sometimes they just don't have the money to make those repairs. So we can come up with like a program, a cleaning schedule, or something depending on what their lateral needs, and really help the customer and educate them so they feel more empowered rather than helpless. Now, the customer always has the option, if they do not want to sign up for that's fine. They have 6 months to provide a video inspection. If in that 6 months they decide to come back to us, it will be a first come, first serve basis. So I can't guarantee that they would be in the program, but we can take them on a first come, first serve basis of what is how much money we have left in that program. Next slide, please. So staffing. In order to manage all of these programs that we're proposing, we really need some different staffing needs. In our budget, in our FY21 budget, we did propose 3 full-time employees plus a new superintendent dedicating 50% of the time, realizing how important SLIP is and how important it is to the community and that community outreach, and really being on the phone with the community members and trying to walk them through such a complicated process. Right now, we have 1 full-time employee. We have borrowed 1 from our engineering partners, and we have 1 part-time employee and 20% of our superintendent's time. And we realize in trying to make this more of an educational program, that is just not sufficient enough. So our proposed staffing is 3 full-time employees and a new superintendent to make sure that they are, there is more time allowed and dedicated to this program. Next slide, please. So what's next? If this moves forward, we do have to update our administrative guidelines. It was last updated in 2010, and we were working on that prior to COVID-19 and looking to go to the ordinance committee. Now with this and everything else, we still would like to move forward and update those guidelines. We also need to update the connection language. This was a request from then Commissioner Jordan, now Council Member Jordan. We haven't forgotten that. It is in our update. He wanted to update the language of the Y connection. He felt that it was very convoluted and not clear to the customer. So I want to recognize that and update that language. We also need to update the multiple units on 1 parcel language. It's just not clear, and so we need to address that. We also need to realize, I think July 1st is when MICOS, which is Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen organizations. So the county is allowing these micro enterprise home kitchen permits to go through, which is fine. We just need to know that that's coming on board, and that will probably be rolled into our SLIP program and update an ordinance accordingly. And we have been in contact with the county and working with them on how to implement this program. Next slide. So our recommendations for the SLIP 2.0 strategy as part of the pandemic response is to defer the fines and penalties for a year and come back and revisit in July of 21, knowing that this pandemic is not going to go anywhere and the economic impacts are probably going to take a while to recover. Also place a hold on sending out commercial notifications. So the commercial notifications, commercial businesses are notified once every 10 years that they need to provide a video. We have currently placed a hold on sending those out, and we'll revisit in July of 2021. We would like to move forward with the city managed video assistance program. Discontinue waiving the public works inspection fees that will, and reallocate that money to this new VAP program. Continue to send out the SLIP 1 revised letters with no penalty fees. However, changing them with these options. Provide SLIP and initiated customers up to 300 in assistance to provide video inspection on a first come first served basis. Now this is SLIP initiated customers. This is similar how currently the public works inspection and permit fees are allocated. The waiving of those fees are for city initiated customers. Right now, they're not for the customer initiated cases, just the SLIP initiated customers. So we wanted to stay consistent there. We also propose that the city manage this video inspector contractor and not do a reimbursement. And we also anticipate the implementation at the end of this year. If we do move forward, going out to bid, pulling together the specs and pulling together the language and the contract with the customer will take some time. And so it'll probably be implemented at the end of this year. With that, I am here, and so is Mr. Bradley Rare, to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Flessy, for a good presentation. So just I have one question while we wait for others. The $300, just to put it into perspective, how much does video inspection cost? How much is this out of the total cost?
So every lateral is different. And that's what we have learned and have tried to educate. It's really hard to put a number on it. So on average, if the customer has a healthy lateral, that means a clean out to provide easy access with, they're on average $300. So if there's something special, like they don't have a clean out, they have to go through a toilet, or if there's accessibility problems, or if it's an extra long lateral, that might be more money. And that's why we say they cover the difference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Thank you, Chair Keller. Ms. Flessy, thank you for presentation. I want to say first, I really like the graphics for the options for the why. I know we struggled with those and different ways to show that. And I think that one really made it really clear where the why stops and starts and where the ownership is. So I just had some questions about, do you know how many customers about have used option 3 of the rehab? Is that underway yet, or is that proposed? That's one question. Yeah.
Chair Keller, Councilmember Sneddon. So notifications just went out in May. We are getting a lot of phone calls. However, nothing has been signed up just yet, but we are getting a lot of inquiries. And so we don't have any data just yet. But I know from monitoring the SLIP emails, there's a lot of questions, and it seems like it's a very positive option for folks.
Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, that's just to kind of get a gauge on whether people will be using that option. And so then when they use that option, or if it becomes available, do customers have access to the capital improvement list? Like, do they know? I don't know. I suppose like if it's not a project that's already on the CIP list, and then their option is only available during that time. So is it city initiated to them to know that, hey, this is coming up and so consider this? Or is it that when they have to work on their sewer lateral, then they have to figure out or call to find out if they're eligible? Or just how does that interface work with the public? I guess I'll just lay the questions out now, and then maybe you can address them. So there's that. And then I'm wondering what the status of those 3 FTEs are, if those were in the proposed budget on Monday night, or if those are to be proposed later. So the status of those. And then just a question of, for options, I guess I don't remember which option it was, of the video options. If there's an issue of trust with people, if the city is contracting with the video, do people trust that that's not somehow tampered with, or that it's somehow not as, well, I don't know, I guess they'd have personal choice, but have you had issues with that, of people saying, well, that's not my sewer lateral, or you know, not having as much quality control or trust in that? And maybe it's not an issue at all. I was just wondering if that's come up. And those are my questions.
Thank you, Chair Keller. Councilmember Sneddon. To answer your first one, how the notifications for CIP are getting to our customers, 2 ways. So when they get a slip letter and they are on the CIP list, they get an insert to let them know that this is an option for them. And if they already had a slip letter sent to them prior, and then they had a notification sent to them that construction is coming, they also had an insert in there letting them know they are eligible for this option and to contact us. To answer the status of the FTEs, yes, those were in the FY21 proposed budget. So if the budget is approved on the 23rd, those would be part of that proposal. And finally, the video assistance program alternative, and whether the customer feels tampered with, that is why we want to partner with Forward Lateral. Forward Lateral will provide that graphic, and it shows an aerial view, kind of like Google Maps, of exactly where their lateral is in relation to the house, and it shows their house, and it shows exactly where the defects are, and it makes everything kind of just open and transparent to the customer, exactly what the plumber is saying, exactly what we're saying, where the spots on those on that line in relation to their house, where those defects or problem areas are on that line. So that's why we really want to partner with Forward Lateral to show that transparency, so there is none of that that tampering with or to earn that trust with our community.
I think that's it. I mean, I know we're trustworthy, and I know the community sometimes needs help seeing where that information is coming from. And I really just want to say I appreciate, this has been a long journey with the SLIP 1.0, 2.0, and you've just been so on it with really being responsive to how to make this educational, getting this out to the community, and responsibilities, and trying to help financially, and just continue to make improvements, and really just appreciative of those efforts, and thank you.
the one thing I wanted to add as well to Amanda's response about why the inspection is so important from not just a trustworthy standpoint, but a lot of the feedback that I get when it comes to my office is like Mrs. Plessy had mentioned about making sure that the video is clearly analyzed accurately so that what the plumber's saying out there on site is cohesive with what we're saying. But we also have a two-step program where we focus on the inspection first in order to help educate the property owner on what is the current condition of their lateral. And often contractors are already pushing them to start making repairs to their lateral without that neutral analysis of it. And so not to say that business model isn't great for some people because they want to get it taken care of. We feel though that it's important to take a pause after looking at your lateral condition, get all the facts together, and then go out and get multiple quotes if you're price sensitive. So, so I just wanted to add that to Mrs. Flessy's response.
Thank you. Commissioner Young?
Thank you very much for the report, Amanda. I appreciate it. Couple questions for you. The first one is, I think you said in 2018, the city sent out 850 letters. Did I get that right? Okay.
Excuse me, I was muted. Chair Keller, Commissioner Yang, yes, we sent out 850 notifications and got quite a response.
Okay, and so I see what triggers exist, which are at the bottom of page 1 of the staff report and then the top of page 2. I'm curious as to which triggers caused those 850 letters to go out. In other words, was it because of the city doing its inspection and saw something with the private lateral? Were there chronic problems identified? Was it a building permit issuance that triggered that? Or was there an overflow or discharge?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, the short answer is yes, all of them. The long answer can be probably clarified a little bit better with Mr. Rare if he wants to chime in on this one.
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, yes, as far as the trend that we've been seeing without the data being broken down like Mrs. Flessy's graphs, we've seen a significant increase in the number of ADUs, so accessory dwelling units within the city, which are a common trigger. When we use the word trigger, they would go into the SLIP program through the building department. So that's a condition of their approval for the ADUs. So a higher proportion of our SLIP letters that went out in 2018 were due to that increase in the ADUs. It's also linked to our condition assessment on our sewer mains. And so when we are inspecting our sewer main with our CCTV camera, we look at the lateral connection condition. And if we see any of those main reasons that a lateral might not be functioning right, so if that's roots coming out of the lateral connection, or we can see fractures, breaks, or heavy grease in the lateral, those would all be issues that are show that the lateral is not in compliance with our municipal code. And so that's what gives us the authority to send them a letter at that time to request that their lateral be inspected. And often this is helping them prevent a sewer lateral spill before it becomes a spill. And so some property owners go, yes, I know I've had issues with my lateral. I didn't realize it was that close to the main, but I know that I was having issues and I was having to, as they call it, root out their lateral regularly. So without the numbers being proposed on a graph, we can look at that, doing that for you in the future, if that's something you're interested in breaking down kind of what is the initial trigger for those letters. But those are the main two reasons. And then of course, the private sewer lateral spills we have on an annual basis, each one of those get one of those letters as well too.
So, I mean, I think it's great that the program is proactive in trying to identify problems that may give rise to a water quality situation violation. I am, trying to focus on any chronic problems or overflows because those are immediate and would give rise to receiving water violations. Do we have many in those two categories? The chronic and the overflows?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, right now for the city sewer overflows, we are trending at 0 for this year, for this calendar year. That's how great our collection team is doing. As far as the private lateral sewer discharges, we try that they get moved to our slip program and really maneuver through our slip program. We really try to implement some kind of a repair or plan so we do reduce or eliminate those spills.
And do we have many of those? Those are the private lateral sewer overflows or discharges.
Right. So one of the charts that is in our presentation and is also going to be part of your monthly manager's report will show that. Right now we have 9. Actually, currently we have 10. So your chart is to the end of May, which was 9. We had once, I believe we had one private spill this past weekend. So they are going down, but they are, one is just too many. And so, but they are reducing. And I think it's because of our proactive approach with this program.
So when you have a private property that is now demonstrating like a chronic problem or a private lateral sewer discharge, seems to me that the risk then of that property creating a situation where receiving waters could be violated is going to be a lot more acute or problematic than some of these others where we're really in a more proactive mode. In other words, someone's getting a building permit. That is helpful because it's allowing us to go in and see what's going on, but there may not be any risk there to a violation of receiving water standards. Whereas the other two, where we've got problems or overflows, are we treating those in any different fashion in terms of trying to push through a correction or a repair? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it came out.
Okay.
Amanda, maybe I can help explain this one. So,
okay.
Commissioner Young, our building permit process where the ADUs are, where we don't have evidence to show that there is a pending potential spill. The process works where they would be notified through their conditions of building approval that they need to make any repairs by the time that they want their final occupancy for their new ADU or addition to their house, anytime it's 400 square feet or 2 or more fixture units. So it's really on their timeline. If they decide to not go through with the project, we're not making them inspect their sewer lateral, make any repairs. And so that's why it's sort of a different part of our slip program than the ones where we do have a pending spill waiting to happen because we can see roots in somebody's lateral blocking 30 or 50% of it. Those are the ones that we kind of keep track of a little closer. We do more outreach with the property owners. We spend a lot more time with them in order to prevent that violation of discharging wastewater into a receiving body. So our staff internally, even though it's all lumped under the SLIP program, we treat them differently in order to help provide different levels of customer service to them. So if that's sort of...
Well, it does, and I agree with you. I think you should treat them differently and place a, keep track of them, make sure that they get corrected sooner than later.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that with the private laterals, spills, I mean, these are the ones that we get called in to help clean up, but I could only venture to guess there are twice, if not 3 times, more spills occurring that the private property owner is taking the means to clean it up themselves. So I think it's kind of misleading in some ways to say that the private spills are probably that low. I'm guessing they're much higher, but that's what we're being called in to help clean up.
And then one final question, if I could, Chair Keller, is do we have any evidence of impacts to receiving waters right now that we might correlate backwards to breaks in either our mains or the laterals, private laterals.
Commissioner Young, can you repeat that question, please? Again?
Sure. Do we have any information of water quality impacts, receiving water quality impacts right now, or over the last 12 months or 24 months, that we might correlate back to breaks in mains or laterals?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, Brad, maybe you can help us out in our, I want to say, no, we have cleaned up when we've responded, we've cleaned up before they made it to any receiving waters, but I would like Mr. Rare to verify that for me.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fussy. So when we respond to either a public spill or a private spill, we do a volume estimate of how many gallons were recovered as well as how many were released to the environment, either to a receiving water body or to just the ground surface and infiltrates and is under. Water Resources Control Board database. It's called CWQS, CIWQUS. And I can't honestly off the top of my head say exactly what that acronym is right this minute, but that data is available in order to show how much our staff estimate make it to receiving water bodies or not. As for sampling of those water bodies, we do have a practice where if a sewer main does overflow and discharge into a creek or into the ocean, we have to do sampling. We do water quality analysis for bacteria, a couple different constituents to verify that the impacts are mitigated and that we don't end up allowing like an ocean, beach to be open if there's a hazard to public health. Like Mrs. Fussy had mentioned, we are doing very well this year. We have not had any spills this calendar year yet. And we're doing such a great job on a lot of our responses that we're not having a lot of this wastewater reach a water body that we're aware of. So the only way that would be happening without our knowledge would be if it's happening subsurface through either cracks or breaks in the sewer. And this has been something we worked on for the last decade. This was a big portion of the consent decree with channel keepers. And so we prioritized a lot of our sewer mains that were within 5 meters and directly above or parallel to a storm drain pipe in order to verify that, because that was one of the points of contention on the consent decree. So we feel like we addressed that about 8 to 9 years ago when we did a lot of work on our system to verify that. And so the hope there is that we've stopped any of that kind of exfiltration from happening out in the system. But from a data standpoint, unless we know that it's spilling, we aren't doing regular water quality samples of, the creeks or the beaches for the purposes of collection system discharge. The treatment plant, of course, handles all their discharge monitoring in order to ensure that safe oceans are there.
That was going to be my next question. Are we routinely monitoring receiving waters such that we get, a baseline idea of what those qualities are? And so it sounds like we are not doing that.
Correct. Not from the standpoint of the sanitary sewer system, but for the treatment plant, it's a condition of their NPDES permit. So.
And what, they sample along the beaches or just out in the receiving waters?
They, Mrs. Fussy can help maybe expand on my answer, because my answer is going to be a little limited, but it's a condition in our permit where we have to monitor our discharge before it goes out to the ocean. And so we have two sampling points. One is prior to the commingling of desal and our rain discharge at our brine mixing box. And so that indicates how safe the wastewater treated at El Estero before it is discharged to the ocean is. And then we have one after the commingling of desal in order to verify what we're discharging to the ocean meets all of our ocean discharge requirements. And that is a continuous ongoing monitoring requirement because of our National Pollution Elimination Discharge System requirement.
So I guess that's correct, Amanda?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
So, but then
Okay.
But then there's no beach sampling that's being done such that we could get an idea of maybe something on land is coming down the watershed and impacting beach water quality.
Commissioner Young, at least wastewater doesn't do that. Creeks may do that. And so maybe Mr. Hagmark knows a little bit more of Creek's sampling program because I know they are consistently out there and monitoring and sampling the creeks and all of our other waterways.
Yes, Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, our Creeks division does do regular sampling of all of our creeks and drainage areas and reports that I believe to the state. So they have some type of monitoring program. I'm not familiar with it, but I do know that they are performing that pretty regularly. That's part of their core charge to monitor those waters.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Fleece, and others for the answers. Any other questions from the commissioners or anybody else?
I do have one question.
Yes, please. Yes, Commissioner.
Just a question on the option 3 or the top hat option. When we're going through and we're doing like a lining of sewer in a neighborhood, I know we're reaching out to the homeowners that have issues with the laterals, but are you letting the entire neighborhood know, like, hey, there's this option to kind of do a preventative maintenance project, or is that not something that we're focused on or concerned about?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Kilborn, we do let them know we're coming in. I don't believe the preventative maintenance we're reaching out. Maybe Mr. Rear can expand a little bit more. It's mostly to those that have slip initiated cases.
That is correct. So Chair Keller, Commissioner Kilborn, we are analyzing everybody's laterals when we are going out to bid for our capital project and trying to get the information to them. We still feel that a factory Y connection that's one solid piece is the best lateral connection that they could have. So if they're sitting there with one of those already, we aren't requesting or telling them they should spend the $1,500. If a property owner came to us and said, I want to do this preventative maintenance, we'd be happy to help them through that. It's just reinforcing the existing Y that's there. We've been spending more of our effort, though, and our resources on those that are really struggling to find the resources to replace their lateral connection.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure not a lot of people would take you up on it there, but, you know, maybe some would. So just thought I would see if they would have some advanced knowledge or warning that they could possibly do that. But just thought I'd ask.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners or council member? Anyone else from the public? Any public comments?
Chair Keller, there's no public comment at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So this concludes this item. So we're going to be to item number 3. It's the authorization to execute a water supply agreement with the Montecito Water District, and Mr. Hagmark will be presenting this.
Thank you, Chair Keller. Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to present the conclusion, hopefully, of 5 years of discussions back and forth with the Montecito Water District. It's a long time coming, and I have about 25 slides to get through here, and feel free to stop and ask me questions along the way. Next slide. So the objectives here today, I think, are to present the key concepts of this agreement. Of course, it's a 100+ page agreement. There's a lot of detail to it. We're here to kind of obviously have you review that, but also answer any questions. And hoping at the end of this, we're looking for a recommendation or thoughts or comments that we can carry on to City Council when we present to them on June 30th. Next slide. So part of the negotiating team, some of this is kind of a recap of where we were last month when I presented the term sheet to the Water Commission, but we had Rebecca Bjork was the Public Works Director, has been intimately involved, myself, Dan Hinsky, our Assistant City Attorney, who, by the way, is also on today. And so if there are legal questions, I'd be happy to bring him on. Jennifer Tomaszewski, our Acting Finance Director, has been involved, and Malcolm Hamilton, our Water Analyst, who's also available on the phone. I do have to say, I also have Sarah Iza, who is also available should we want to discuss any permitting questions. So I'm going to go through the background, not going to go too far back, but talk a little bit about the plan itself, the permits that we have that support it, kind of how the negotiations have transpired. And I'm going to get into the core principles of this water supply agreement, the main guiding principles of it. We can talk about some of the key terms, kind of do a funding overview. I am going to touch a little bit on the water supply planning and showing how this agreement impacts that water supply planning, next steps, and then ultimately a recommendation. Next slide. So a little recap, the Charles E. Meyer desalination facility was completed in 1992. It was placed in long-term standby in 1994. And during that time, partners, Montecito and Goleta, were partners in the facility that was constructed in 1992. Over that period, when it was placed in long-term standby, they decided they no longer wanted to participate in any ongoing costs. However, the city went on to get permanent permitting for the facility in 1996. We had initially gotten temporary permits to get it up and running, but then went ahead and followed through to get the permanent permits for that. Next slide. I just wanted to recap on what those permits are because there are a lot of them. The main overarching permit to operate was provided by the California Coastal Commission as a coastal development permit. Their main focus, it's kind of a hybrid in this area, their main focus is typically from the beach out into the ocean, but in this case, they particularly also looked at the desal plant itself, because we also have a local city coastal development permit, which was intended to try and take some of the workload burden off of the Coastal Commission. But at the time when this desal plant permit was approved, they approved the entire project. We also have an NPDES permit for the discharge of brine, and that permit is also looks at the intake as well. We have a state's lands leased for the outfall structure. Of course, we're working with the Department of Public Health for the permitted drinking water. Army Corps is also involved, and then there's our local CDP. So I'm going to dive into that on the next slide. Just talk a little bit about the coastal department permit that was issued in 1996. It's 4-96-119. And so in there, the California Coastal Commission hereby grants a permit to the city of Santa Barbara for the conversion of a temporary desal facilities to permanent facilities. And it included up to a capacity of 10,000 acre-feet a year. Further down on page 7, it gets into because of local and regional drought effects on all South Coast water barriers, the desal facility have been sized to potentially accommodate regional emergency water supply needs, as well as the city of Santa Barbara on an as-needed basis. At the maximum proposed capacity of 10,000, a portion of the desal plant output may be available for sale to other neighboring water purveyors. So it has been contemplated since the beginning that there would be partners. Next slide. And furthermore, down on in that same coastal development permit, scenario 3 talks about the desal plant being operated as a base load, basically a core part of our supply during both drought and non-drought periods. And it further goes on to meet regional needs during drought and to produce water for exchange with other purveyors during non-drought periods. So in summary, we feel like our permits clearly identify this facility and its ability to meet both the city's needs, but also be utilized to meet regional water supply needs, including as part of this water supply agreement. Next slide. So with that, in 2014, when the cities began our efforts to reactivate the desalination plant, Montecito Water District reached out to us to request to participate. Staff directed to begin formal negotiations. We went to council. Council directed us to work with Montecito on that. And negotiations were from there on kind of off again, on again, depending on Montecito had been exploring other options for themselves. We eventually established an opportunity or a way in which Montecito would start participating financially in the costs of those negotiations, because we were creating documents that we needed to negotiate. And so we did, we're sharing 50-50 in the cost of developing this contract. They were paused in March of 2017. At that point, Montecito was exploring building their own desalination plant and other options. Next slide. And then in 2018, we restarted negotiations and have been working pretty consistently since then. Which ultimately led to a term sheet, which is basically the guiding principles of the water supply agreement, which was approved by both the Montecito Board and the City Council in January of 2019. Next slide. So core principles of the water supply agreement: the city will own and operate the desal plant and conveyance pipeline. So this agreement does not transfer any ownership to Montecito. In many ways, I'm going to you may keep coming back to this. In many ways, this kind of looks a lot like our Cater joint powers agreement, in which Montecito and Carpinteria share in the cost of operating that plant, but they have no ownership in the plant. The city owns, operates, staffs the Cater water treatment plant, and they proportionately share in the cost of operating it. So in some ways, this agreement parallels that. Again, this is a water sales agreement, not just a water treatment, but there are a lot of similarities in that. And I just wanted to remind the commission that that's almost a 50-year-old agreement that we have with them for that. This is a take or pay term. So regardless of water supply conditions out there, Montecito would be obligated to pay the cost of operating this facility and its capital cost debt service that goes with it. So they pay whether they take the water or not. The water pricing reflects the full cost to finance and operate the plant to produce the water supply. We are not subsidizing water to Montecito. It also recognizes the city's historical expenditures and risks. So during the time between when Montecito backed out and when we reactivated the plant, the city had put out money to maintain the existing facility, to maintain the permits, and this agreement recognizes that and has Montecito reimbursing city customers for carrying that expenditure and risk. It protects the city's water supplies. It ultimately, we are not obligating ourselves to deliver water that we don't have. And so we believe that we can continue to still meet the needs of our customers while reducing the risks. And that's the big thing. Anytime you operate any facility, I don't care if it's water treatment, wastewater treatment, or in this case, desal, there are inherent risks and challenges of operating that. And the way that this has been structured, Montecito will be sharing in those risks. And of course, this supports regional supply management. It goes without saying, the state is really interested in funding regional solutions, regional projects like that. In fact, we can talk about a little later, we got $1 million grant towards the conveyance pipeline itself. And the only reason we got that is because this pipeline supports regional water supply planning. Furthermore, we've also have provisions in here that protect the city in the event of an emergency. Next slide. So then I'm going to walk you through the key terms now, and then we'll talk about next steps. Let's go through the terms. Next slide. So the term of the agreement is 50 years. I do have to admit that was what took so long to negotiate, is trying to come up with an agreement that was flexible enough that it could adapt to the needs and changes of the city. Thinking back what's happened since 1970 to today, there's been a lot of changes in technology, and we wanted to make sure that this agreement could weather that 50 years. I certainly think if it was a 20-year agreement, it would have been far easier to put that together. But the volume of water ended up being 1,430 acre feet per year. And the source of water is at the city's discretion. The cost for the water is based on the cost of producing desal water, but the city can use any one of its supplies to fulfill the contract water annually. Next slide. So there are clauses in the contract, excuses for performance, such as uncontrolled events, in which the city would be excused from delivery. However, it also has the district is committed to paying the fixed costs, because those would be costs that we would have no matter what. And the same thing goes, it's reciprocal to the district if for some reason they're unable to take delivery of water due to an emergency, an uncontrollable event. The district would be excused from paying the variable costs, but they would not be excused from paying fixed costs. Next slide. We did spend a lot of time in negotiations on this theoretical critical water emergency. I can say we've never faced something this severe yet, but we wanted to recognize that in 50 years with climate change, we just don't know what we could face. And so with that, there are relief to the city under certain circumstances. One of them is when the plan is upgraded to 5,000 acre feet a year, we are relieved from delivery in cases of a critical emergency, and would be looking to do potentially some sharing of share the pain approach to ensure that both of our communities have sufficient water to meet health and safety needs. We also recognize that there potentially could be a severe drought, of which we have not seen of this magnitude yet, but there potentially could. And in that case, the city would be obligated to expand the plant to 7,500 acre feet a year. And at that point, if we are still challenged to meet basic health and safety needs of our community, there is conditions in the contract that allow us to proportionately distribute that water such that our per capita impacts to our community are equivalent to Montecito's. And I think that's important there. Certainly the per capita water use in Montecito is very high because they do have, they're a community, a very rural type community with a lot of landscaping. But in this scenario, it recognizes that we would be looking at per capita to be proportioning water the same. And we also recognize in there that the city also provides the local hospital and a lot of the commercial and industrial spaces. So in addition to the sharing of the basic health and safety, there would also be recognition of water for commercial and industrial, which Montecito residents rely on Santa Barbara businesses to provide. Next slide. So risk management, and I think this is a really good point to get across. The way the agreement has been structured is we proportionately share in those risks. The risk to operations, should there be a plant failure or a piece of equipment that needs to be replaced, a major capital project that needs to be undertaken, Montecito would be participating in the proportionate share of those costs, which right now would be 100% on the city. So there's a significant benefit in the long term to our community and our ratepayers for that. Should there be a change in regulation, Montecito in this agreement would have to participate in based on their proportional share. And of course, climate change. I mean, as things change, they would be participating as well in their proportionate share. This includes potentially a project for renewable energy. Should there become a viable option for putting in solar around the facility, Montecito would be participating in that project proportionately. When the community moves to community choice energy, so if we in the next few years start to power this facility with 100% renewable energy, Montecito is participating in the cost of that as proportionate to the volume of water that they're getting. Next slide. So a big component of making this agreement work is this conveyance pipeline project. And this has been years in the making to piece this together. But what it consists of is upgrades at the Charles E. Meyer desalination plant to the pump station that will allow us to pump water up to the Cater water treatment plant, where that water would be blended with treated surface water, whether that's state water, Cachuma water, Gibraltar water. Would be able to blend those water from there. And this is the genius of the system that was designed. You can move water from the Cater Clearwell to anywhere on the South Coast. In case of Montecito, this would be the South Coast conduit in which they currently get treated Cachuma water or state water. To make this happen, we do have to put in about 1,400 feet of new pipeline, and that's that blue section there, where it will then tie into an existing 24-inch city transmission main, which we will repurpose to be part of this conveyance project. Ultimately, the cost sharing of this, we spent a lot of time negotiating with Montecito, and how we determined their participation was based on what it would have cost Montecito to put in a dedicated pipeline solely for their needs. And that's how we backed into Montecito's participation in these costs will be 65% of those costs going forward. Right now we're estimating the total cost of all of these projects combined is somewhere in the $19 million range. We've only bid out the conveyance pipeline work, which is roughly around 12 million for all those costs. And we've designed the conveyance pipeline work, but we haven't bid that out. And we are just starting design of the pump station upgrades that need to be done there. Next slide. So as mentioned, the cost and the proportional share, this is just a quick breakdown of how that works. The plant capital charge, that is for us in this case, that is the cost that we have taken on. That is the debt service to the loan that we have for roughly 72 million. They will be taking on a proportional share based on their capacity. And so in this case, their capacity is 1,430 acre feet divided by the plant's current capacity, which is 3,125 acre feet, works out to about 45% of the plant capital charge will then be picked up by Montecito. Plant operations and maintenance, again, goes on proportional. It'll be based as far as the variable cost, that's electricity, chemicals, that'll be based on production. And then the fixed costs will be based on capacity. Water supply development fee, this is that amount that Montecito will be paying to reimburse city customers for the cost of maintaining the desal plant from 96 until 2015. This works out to about $4.5 million that they would pay over the next 20 years. As I mentioned, the conveyance pipeline, they'll be picking up just shy of 65% of that. Of course, there's the administrative cost of managing, overseeing desal, and they'll be picking up their proportionate share of that. And we also have agreed to share proportionately in any grant funding that we do get. Next slide. So benefits to the city in the form of costs. So do my best to try and simplify this, but once Montecito starts receiving water, which we anticipate starting to make deliveries in fiscal year 22, which I think is January 1st of 21, they will start paying us $4.5 million annually, which is about the equivalent of a 7.5% rate increase for city customers. So when we are looking at rates, and we're going to be talking about rates here soon again, is how does that benefit, if the agreement is approved, how does that benefit rate customers? And we see that initially with having being able to lower the impacts to our rate customers as we continue to ramp up to take on the infrastructure replacement that needs to happen. Also, as I mentioned before, it reduces our exposure to long-term capital maintenance and renewal costs and changes in regulations and other things that come along. And just a reminder that the city retains discretion to operate the plant to the maximum benefit of its customers. We own this plant just like we own Cater. It's I think it makes for a much cleaner ownership, and certainly we're focused on maximizing the operation of that. Next slide. So we intend in this agreement to commence deliveries on January 1st of 2022. I apologize, I think I said 2021. In 2022. To make that happen, we will be working immediately on getting that conveyance pipeline in place and subsequently the renewal project and of course the desal water pump station upgrades done. Next slide. So just a little bit about the conveyance pipeline and how we're going to fund that. So we've recently settled with a joint lawsuit against Southern California Edison for the Thomas Fire, and the city was awarded $19 million for damages to Gibraltar. Those damages on the form of sediment, which is taking up now capacity, so lost capacity in Gibraltar. And so we are proposing to utilize those funds to initiate this conveyance pipeline project. We believe that puts the city in a good position and kind of helps us to be able to get desalinated water anywhere in our service area. As it's currently plumbed, we are unable to get it up into the foothill regions of the city. And so this project would help to build resiliency and reliability in our water system. The desal plant capacity, this agreement does not immediately trigger capacity upgrades. We're currently looking at our water supply planning as reported last month from Ms. Corey, our water supply analyst. We have adequate water for the next 3 years based on what we currently are carrying in Cachuma and Gibraltar and are currently producing from desal, which is allowing us to keep our groundwater off. And we feel like we're in a good position that we would not be looking to entertain any type of capacity upgrade in the near future. However, given the extent of this agreement being 50 years and the fact that the climate is changing and we anticipate drier and drier times, we anticipate that at some point there will likely be an increase, an upgrade to the capacity. When we go to do those upgrades to capacity, Montecito would be participating in those additional costs of expansion based on their proportionate share. There's also the debt service. We anticipate at this point that we would likely debt fund that, but you know, it'll have to depend on where we are at that point. Next slide. I do want to talk a little bit about the water supply planning as it relates to this. And so what we did is we put together some extreme scenarios here to kind of show how this agreement does not negatively impact the city's water supply planning. And so what we've done here is this scenario assumes basically water use as it is currently, which is that 30% reduction from normal. This assumes no state water purchases, no Gibraltar water, no expanded use of recycled water. And when I say that, that is potentially potable reuse, which is currently part of our enhanced urban water management plan. We're exploring what those other options are, but this does not include any use of that. and it assumes demands of 1,430 acre-feet a year to Montecito. And what I wanted to get across here is with that, we still have adequate demands to meet our community's needs. Next slide. In this scenario, what we did is I'm looking at pre-drought. So I took the community using roughly 13,000 acre-feet a year that we were using before instead of the 10 that we're using now. And I looked at no Gibraltar supply. I looked at, we are utilizing the state water capacity. So we are purchasing water, no increase in use of recycled water, and into this scenario and weather conditions similar to 2016, 2017, we're still able to meet the community's needs while still supplying water under this agreement. So these were intended to be kind of just extreme scenarios that were thrown in here, and how we would meet those needs utilizing the city's existing water supplies. Next slide. So in summary, I want to just talk quickly about the benefits. We've talked about them a little bit, but the desal plant was conceived as a regional water supply. I think there's a lot of benefits in working regionally. I think the state is pushing us to work regionally on solving these water issues. And I think this is a good example of that. I think by entering into this agreement, it opens the door for us for other grant funding opportunities related to the facility and its maintenance and upgrades in the future. As mentioned before, I think this significantly reduces the city's exposure and risks associated with operation and maintenance of the facility. And I think there's a lot of economies of scale with this. As the plant particularly gets expanded in the future, the unit costs go down, and you have a lot of fixed costs associated with operating any facility in the form of staff and materials, and producing more water doesn't necessarily cost more money. So you actually can reduce the unit cost of water if it is expanded in the future. The improved water quality, as we've talked about before, being able to take this high quality desalinated water, which is low in organics, and we're able to blend it with our surface water, which is high in naturally occurring organics, allows us better water quality across the city's distribution system, and potentially opens us up to being able to treat even more difficult water quality following wildfires and flooding along the San Ynez River. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I think is important to understand when two public agencies are negotiating is it really can't be a win-lose negotiation. And so I feel like what we have put together and what's before you today is a win-win agreement. I feel like it's one that I can stand up in front of our customers and say, this is good for our customers. This is good for the city. It's good for water rates. It's good for sharing our risk. But I think it's also an agreement that Montecito Water District can stand up in front of their customers and say, this is a fair and reasonable agreement for them as well. Next slide. So a little bit about the next steps. So the Montecito board has had, let's say, 2 or 3 public meetings over the last month or so, trying to inform their community about what's in the agreement and what it means, along with what water rates they need in place to support it. And they are looking to have a meeting on June 25th, where they will ultimately be making a decision on whether or not to enter this agreement. Assuming they choose to enter into this agreement, we would be then turning around and taking this to City Council on June 30th for their consideration. Next slide. So with that, I want to wrap up here with the recommendations. We're looking to authorize the city to execute a water supply agreement with Montecito for a term of 50 years and authorize the use of the $19 million settlement of claims against Southern Cal and Edison to help fund the construction of the conveyance pipeline project as described in the water supply agreement. And with that, that ends my next slide. That ends my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions commissioners may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hartmark. It's a complicated issue, but I think that laid it out well. Any questions from the commissioners or council members then? Okay. Do we have any questions from the public?
Chair Keller, we do have one attendee that would like to make a public comment.
Okay.
Ms. Hauser, I am going to unmute you. You are now self-muted. You have 2 minutes. Ms. Hauser, please unmute yourself. There we go.
Unmuted. Am I on now?
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you. I just want to thank Joshua Hagemark for all the work he's put in on this. It's been a, up and down rough road. And I just want to emphasize that that the one water concept of the city water supply is still in my mind, and I think many minds, that the security of water in Santa Barbara, and that this piece is one part of it. It's a big part, but it's one part. And I want to emphasize Mr. Hagemark's statement that the contract is for desal, but the water can be from all sources. And I think that this first step to regional is what the state is looking for. The state doesn't want a bunch of desal holes around the state. So this is an important first step to get to a regional solution. And then having said that, in the water supply planning chart, Heal the Ocean is looking for that purple line, the recycled water line, barely perceptible on that chart. But we want to see this number greatly enlarged. I know it's attached to the development of potable reuse, but we have to keep pushing that way to not waste this sort of water. And I know this upcoming conference with Water Resources is going to be talking about potable reuse. But I want to thank Joshua again and the city for working on this, hanging in there, and getting this situation going. Important first step.
Thank you very much for that comment. And yes, I think it's a really good point that that figure did not show any reclaimed water, recycled water. So, we should really consider that as part of our regular supply. We actually have it. So, yes, Commissioner Davis.
No, I would just want to make my comments, or if we're going to comments from the commission now, if it's the appropriate time.
Yes, please.
Okay, I want to start just one to talk about the fact that I think that the staff, the negotiating team, has done an incredible job over a long period of time, and I cannot even imagine trying to get down to the level of detail that they've gotten to. So one, I want to thank every member of the team and Mr. Hagemark's leadership of that team in getting this done. 4 years ago, the council basically told the Water Commission that we were not to be involved in the development of this agreement. And over the years, it was brought to us after the fact as to what the terms were going to be. So I feel a little awkward that we're being asked today basically to get into the terms which council has directed. And I think staff has delivered on the direction of the terms that council had previously endorsed. My preference would have been just input today from the commission. Obviously, this late in the game, I think any comments which would, if you will, change the direction of the agreement would be almost inappropriate. So I feel like, and I don't say this in a pejorative term, to some degree we're being asked to rubber stamp or at least endorse at the end of a concept, something which we were not involved with. That being said, I think the benefits of this program are tremendous. Yes, I think it's a fair and equitable agreement. It's been supported by both bodies over a number of years. I think one of the great benefits here is, again, getting into the regional management of the water supply. And again, the city moving into using the desal plan as a stepping stone to regional cooperation and supply is a move in a great direction. Clearly, the enhancement of the conveyance pipeline to be able to utilize our desal water to service the full city region and to the regional area over time, if necessary, I think is a tremendous benefit to everybody. I think if I had to say what my concerns would have been in the negotiation had we been involved in setting of the terms, I think the term of 50 years is way too long. I mean, Mr. Hagmark has indicated that would have preferred basically something shorter, but we ended up with 50. I think that's way too long. I think something shorter with earlier renewal clauses, which essentially we could have assessed, the city would have been able to contest the changing of conditions and costs over time and where we were in terms of both our needs as well as the regulations statewide and nationally on facilities such as this could have been addressed, but we are tied into a 50 agreement, which if I look at when we're doing long-term ground leases on projects, housing or other, 50 years is too long to not have a reopen or a renewal to take conditions into effect. The conveyance pipeline is a great benefit to us. I would have been concerned that in fact they don't have, Montecito doesn't have to share unless the plan is expanded to 5,000 acre feet, which, you know, there's so many unknowns between now and then as to how we would ever get to plan expansion, how much it would cost, what the regulations might be at that time, even with the approvals that we currently have. Again, not having them at least have some skin in the game per se up front relative to the conveyance pipeline, I probably would have pushed a little bit harder on that. I think the whole discussion of adverse water system events in terms of the drought condition of only if the plan is at 7,500 acre feet, essentially do we have to then be able to reduce our commitment to them? I think I would have pushed a little bit harder on that. In there, in the staff report on page 3, the city basically indicates, or the staff says the city would manage the water supplies so that the Montecito Water District water is surplus to the quantity needed to provide service to the city's water system. Little concerned that, you know, that's going to be interpreted 10 years from now by people that are not at the table today and how that is done. 1,400 acre feet, let's just make a gross assumption that our stable water demand right now is about 4,000 acre feet. That's a 10% commitment, additional 10% commitment at that point. Such that in extreme drought condition, we'd be asking our community to conserve it in an increased 10% amount in order to supply Montecito up until the fact that until we have a desal plan of 7,500 acre feet. I would have been concerned about that. There's a little bit of an issue here as to the future costs to our ratepayers. And I think the staff has done, the negotiating team has done an incredible job in trying to, again, get the benefits back to our ratepayers over time. We've talked about it also in terms of the contributions that Montecito would make it on various things from capital to operations to maintenance, et cetera, all of which essentially I just have concern that if I go back 50 years, which came into the city almost 50 years ago. So many things change that to essentially think that we've thought out what the unknown unknowns are. It's just a little bit difficult. So in summary, right, I think 52 years is too long. I think there should have been more contribution relative to the conveyance pipeline, which leads into too much dependence upon desal expansion for the financial contributions from Montecito District and control over the drought buffer aspect of what desal is supposed to be. All that said, I think the council basically has over the years given direction as to the terms of the agreement. Though the staff and negotiating team have done a fair agreement to that degree. And so when there is a motion, I will be voting yes in that regard. Again, thanks everybody for the work in that on this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Dare, for all those insights. Really good points. Anyone else? Other commissioners? Councilmember Sneddon? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Sneddon.
Sorry, I'm so slow on the draw there to turn the camera on. I just want to echo that the hard work and very careful negotiations that Mr. Hagmark and Mr. Henschke and the whole team have done throughout this process. And I think to Commissioner Davis's points, some of those were pushed hard at different points and concessions at different points. And it's been a very give and take process that I think does result in a win-win for both entities. And there will be some things over time to see how those settle out. But overall, just very pleased with the hard work and attention to detail that has gone into this agreement throughout. And also to Commissioner Davis's comment, it has come back and forth to the current council and the different iterations of current council in closed session and in different times because it's a negotiation. So it does reflect current council direction, even though past council may have given different direction. And I do, when it does come to the Montecito board, if they have similar comments that something could have been pushed harder, renegotiated, I have a question about what would be the process from there. I'm hoping that isn't the case, but I think it's good for us to know, if they do have an opportunity to renegotiate terms, would the Water Commission want another chance to weigh in on some of those things to negotiate? And Commissioner Davis is, if you could have negotiated, these are what you would have said. So if it goes to Montecito and there are issues there, what would be the process past then, I guess, is a question. But overall, I think this is good resiliency planning, regional water management, looking into the future. And 50 years is a very long time with a lot of unforeseens. But I think some of those extraordinary circumstances are written into the terms of the agreement. Just overall want to reiterate how much has gone into the back and forth of this, and that it has been discussed throughout. But if you could just speak to that, the process from here on out, hopefully it goes smoothly, but if it doesn't, what happens next?
Chair Keller, Councilmember Sneddon, yeah, and if Mr. Henschke wants to chime in too, this agreement, it in essence is what it is. I think to try and change anything in it is really restarting negotiations over, because there is, and I appreciate Councilmember Sneddon saying this, it really is this carefully crafted, if this is really important to them, well, this is what it would take for it to work for the city. You know what I mean? So it's been kind of crafted. So if someone goes in there and wants to pull out one of these pieces, then it really requires almost a renegotiation of the contract, because we've put so much thought into the trade-offs that go with it. So I really don't think there's much room for changing components of this point without renegotiating it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the water service, recommend to council the approval of the water. Actually, let me just put it this way. I recommend we approve staff recommendations A and B.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Can we have the roll call?
Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to have to, just as a point of order, go back to SLIP 2.0. I jumped for voting on the recommendation from that was provided to us. So we're just going to take a quick look at the recommendation, and then I'll ask for if there's any further comment, or if we can go and have a motion for it, just to make sure we have that. So we're skipping through to the recommendation. Anyone would like to have any comments before we go forward with the vote on the recommendation? If not, could I have a motion to on this?
I'd make the motion on the staff recommendation. The only comment I would make, though, it is listed in our staff report that it's an information update only, but it is again an action item. So I'd make the motion staff recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. First by Davis, second by Kilborn. Roll call, Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So on to our last item on the administrative items is the Water Agency's report, and Ms. Kathleen Taylor will be presenting.
You're on mute, Kathy.
Yes, it's still muted. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Keller and Commissioners. I'm here to give you updates on CCWA, USBR, CCRB, and the Regional Board. Regarding CCWA, the Warren Act, they got a 5-year contract extension, and this is a really good news for us. This is to allow the water to flow into Lake Kachuma, the state water, and it's scheduled for to be heard by the CCWA board for approval by June 25th. The existing Warren Act contract expires July 27th. And this is something they've been working on for well over a year, and we were concerned that they were not going to get it. So it's great news that they got it. As USBR, their concern here is the carryover water. We had a meeting on June 10th last week with the USBR, and Michael Jackson with the USBR, he suggested at the end of the meeting, it was not an agendized item, but he suggested capping our carryover amounts. I'm sure as you're aware, this would be really problematic for us and our other Kachuma member units. Our long-term water supply plan depends on our carryover water. And if we were to cap or lose our carryover water, our ability to store carryover water, it would really change how we operate at the lake. It would push us to a use it or lose it model. As you know, this would not be prudent management of our water supplies, and it's contrary to the state's water conservation policies. Right now, we're looking for a path forward. So our next step is we're going to meet with our other Kachuma member units to strategize how to best proceed and to contemplate really what the state's driver is for that. I think I'll pause there. I'm sure we'll have some questions.
I think at this point we're actually trying to figure out what the Bureau meant. We're so alarmed by the conversation and how casually it was presented to the member units that we're hoping there was some misunderstanding that in a play here. But Michael Jackson, the regional director for the Bureau, seemed to lay out this plan that there was some cap that should be put on carryover water, and it basically, if the member units as a whole have hit that cap, then they would not allocate any additional water, which if you start, which I feel is kind of the disconnect is their misunderstanding of water supply planning, because the results of that, if someone was going to tell you they're not going to give you any more water unless you use the water you have, it puts you in this position where you're, as Kathy and Ms. Taylor said, you use it or lose it. It's going to be difficult for me to tell our community they need to continue to conserve and we invest in conservation when that water that should have been allocated to, or doesn't get allocated to us because we didn't use water from last year. So it's really alarming, and I think it's kind of the disconnect. Unfortunately, the Bureau doesn't have any expertise in water supply planning. And I don't know yet where the county lands. I haven't spoke with the county yet on this, but I certainly hope that the county would not support an initiative that would limit the storage of water in the reservoir if storage capacity is available.
If I understand, at this point, it was just a comment. It was not something formal so we're just waiting to see if they go with this idea any further, no?
Yeah, it kind of got the feeling like he just wanted to throw it out there and see what would happen with it. But he did make the comment that this would be something he was looking to implement in this next year's allocations. So that part certainly has got our attention. And I hope that the next time we come back and talk, we'll have more information and at least can clarify the issue. But in essence, I see if the Bureau goes down this as really an act of war in how we do our water supply planning on the.
Should we consider talking to our public officials to sort of begin to make that point that this makes no sense and it really goes against everything we have in terms of planning, and so that we stop it by going relatively rapidly up the political chain to say this can't go forward.
Yeah, and I completely agree. We've been trying. In fact, we're going to be meeting with Council Members Sneddon and Friedman later today just to talk a little bit about this. But I think right now I'm trying to stay open-minded. We're collecting information, and then as soon as we have the facts in front of us, then I absolutely think I even think we may even want to get our state representatives in play, because the state as a whole has been big on supporting conservation. And when you're supporting conservation, you support agencies being able to carry over water that's been allocated to them, right? Because those two go together. If you penalize the communities for storing water, then they're taking away the drivers for conservation.
Yeah, well, I was even thinking of representatives at the federal level. So Representative
Carbajal, yeah, Councilman, or Congressman Carbajal, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that was the most concerning news that I have to report to you today. As Joshua said, we are very concerned. We're meeting, with our council members today, and then later on this afternoon we'll be meeting with some representatives from Goleta. So hopefully we'll figure out a path forward. And for me, what's concerning is I really don't understand what the driver is, because it is so out of step with the state's position on water conservation and what we've been working towards and striving to do, and this does not make any sense. So with that said, well, stay tuned and we'll report back. As for CCRB, they're still continuing to support the regional board on the state water board order. They're working on outlines and drafting content for the Bureau for the plans that are required under the term 24 of the water board order. And we are working with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I wanted to report on that. We desire to inject water at our San Roque well that would feed into the Foothill Basin. This would be a great way for us to store water, as well. It would help the groundwater basin more quickly recover from the droughts. However, the Cater water that we would be injecting, it exceeds the state's basin plan for chlorides, sulfates, and boron. And this is what is prohibiting us from being able to inject the water into the basin. per the regional board's criteria. So we had some really productive conversations with the regional board's water quality board staff, and they had us explore a few options, and we then looked at the data only to find that the existing groundwater in the Foothill Basin, as well as the creeks that feed into the Foothill Basin, all exceed the limits for the chlorides, sulfates, and boron that is prescribed by the basin plan. So we're arguing that by putting treated Cater water into the ground, we would not be degrading the basin because the basin doesn't comply with the basin plan. So the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff, they heard us, and they are setting up a meeting internally to discuss our options and a path forward for how we can inject water. And we have a follow-up meeting with the staff on June 15th. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will have a path forward for being able to inject Cater water into the Foothill Basin. And
I just wanted to share my appreciation, Commissioner Young has been incredibly helpful. Ms. Taylor and I have met with him and just talking about how to work most effectively with regional board staff who are incredibly overwhelmed. They have a huge task on their hands just in general, and really appreciate his thoughtful input on how best to work with those staff, and hopefully we can reach a mutually win-win solution on this, because I think the regional board in general is incredibly supportive of groundwater recharge, and so it's just trying to figure out how to navigate through some of the existing policies, which right now are limiting that.
So with that concludes my update on these agencies.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you for the report. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Young?
No, I was just going to add that sometimes we've got, agencies that look at things a little bit differently, and you've got different requirements. And I think that the city's purpose is a purpose that, we support everywhere in terms of conjunctive use and being able to store water. It makes good sense to me. I think it would make good sense to the regional board itself, the members. And it's just a matter of trying to finesse your way through these different requirements. And I appreciate you keeping me in on the loop, Kathy, with what happens. So thank you.
Will do. And I must say this, the staff has been very helpful and receptive to our desires.
Good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Snedden or other commissioners? Do we have any comments? Sorry, do we have any comments from the public?
Chair Keller, no, we don't.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I think that concludes this item. So we're a bit late, and we just have one item, and I think we can go very quickly through it, the Water Resources Management Report. Basically, not so much going through the report, but what's the use of the report, and figure out how we go forward with this. So,
thank you, Chair Keller. Yeah, I just wanted to revisit this one. I think all of us are going through significant changes in how we communicate, and I understand. I mean, I've been around since 2013 in this capacity. And, this report, as I had understood it, was something that was handed out to the Water Commission at the meetings. And of course, staff was there to answer questions, but it was intended to be kind of a dashboard that the Water Commission could have with them, potentially use it to answer questions from the community. And of course, if they had questions, they could bring it to the next meeting and we can talk about it. And I just wanted to put that out there that maybe that's trying to get back to that. What I would like to do is try to work to make this available. I do not believe I can make it available with the packet that goes out because it's almost a week ahead of time, but try and make this available a few days ahead of time and really leave this opportunity open here for me to share any anomalies or some trend that I see, and then of course be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners have. I do, Ms. Picaro, if you could take us to the last slide. There's one thing that I did want to highlight, and of course, if you have any questions about any of the data in here, I'd be happy to speak to it. But I want to take us to our last slide because I did want to talk about our water quality newsletter. As you guys may recall, it's typically referred to as the CCNR, community,
Consumer confidence.
Thank you, Consumer Confidence Report, which is a requirement that we put out every year. And we typically have published this trifold document that we would send out to all of our customers, and literally thousands and thousands of dollars of spending this thing out. And so in the time of COVID, we feel like it was a great time to really rethink how we did this. And so what we've gone to is a online report. We've got a lot of interesting articles in there, along with detailed description of the city's water quality and where we stand with relations to the maximum contaminant levels on all of the monitored constituents that may appear in water. And so what we're going to be sending out, I believe starting on Monday or early next week, we'll be sending out postcards to all of our customers. So all 24,000 customers are going to be getting postcards next week, letting them know that this consumer confidence report is now available in English and Spanish. And it will have a QR code where you can put your phone up to it, and it'll take you right to the document. Or you can also type in the web address and go to it as well. And anyway, we hope you will take a look at it, and we're here to answer any questions. I know the report itself has a bunch of phone numbers in there that will take you to our lab, and lab would be happy to talk you through it. We've also wanted to point out that in an effort, and we're continuing to challenge ourselves with this, but as a One Water organization, you'll notice in the consumer confidence report, they were also highlighting some work that's going on in wastewater. So we're using this opportunity. It's just another opportunity to communicate with communicate what's going on. And so with that, that ends my presentation today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? I think it's a good idea to sort of take a look at that report, and then maybe in future meetings, we'll just have comments or questions, or you provide us with any points, highlights, or things that have been changing. Any other comments or questions? I think it's also a good idea to have the other report that way. Yes, sorry.
We do have public comment on this item.
Okay, yes, please.
Ms. Hauser, I will unmute you. Okay, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, thank you very much, everybody. I know we're way over, and so I go really fast, but the green BioBot chart, is there just one comment that I can make on that? Is it easy enough to pull that up again or not? If not, because it wasn't in the package and my staff just called it out to me, and I just want to, in 60 seconds, point out something. In this chart, the point of the BioBot thing is early detection to alert and guide the community as waves of COVID come and go, as they're predicted to do. In this green chart, the Memorial Day weekend, phase 1 lifting shows numbers jump to 15,380 cases, to 23,560 cases, to 42,728 and 1,100 cases. And then you'll see another jump when phase 2 is lifted. I mean, it soars to 702,000. So and realizing that the level of detection was changed to pick up more, but nevertheless, these are really significant numbers as phases are lifted. The Memorial Day weekend came in. And so I just want to reiterate that this exercise is hugely important for public health as we go in and out of these COVID waves as predicted, and that we should work with BioBot to really tune it to us and by no means drop it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hauser. I think that's a really important comment to make. And I agree that we shouldn't drop it just and have no information. I think we need to figure out how do we provide that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this point? Okay, well, that concludes our current meeting. And so our next meeting will be on July 16, 2020. So thank you, everybody. And thanks to the staff for all their hard work and putting this all together. Thank you. Bye.